Midnight is not when life is quiet, it is when the unseen is loud while your body sleeps. Come, decisions are being negotiated about your future. Some battles are never fought in daylight. Come, yet they decide everything you face during the day. If you think rest means vulnerability, you have misunderstood spiritual authority. What you release before sleep can work harder than what you do while awake. Stay with this message, because tonight you may learn how to win battles you never knew were happening. Midnight is not just a time on the clock, it is a spiritual boundary. It is a moment when one day hands over authority to another, when cycles shift, and when unseen realms become highly active. Many destinies have been altered at midnight. Come, not because people were awake physically, but because something was awake spiritually on their behalf. There are hours when human strength is weakest, yet spiritual activity is strongest, and midnight is one of those hours. This is why certain battles cannot be confronted in the afternoon. Then some victories will never respond to casual prayers spoken in convenience. They demand precision, alignment, and timing. There are battles you are not conscious of, yet they are conscious of you. While your body sleeps, negotiations are happening concerning your future, your family, your calling, and your progress. Spiritual warfare does not pause because you are tired, and opposition does not wait for you to be ready. This is why wisdom teaches a believer to program the atmosphere before rest. Come, to release words that continue speaking when the mouth is silent, and to establish spiritual authority that operates beyond physical awareness. Prayer is not limited to the moment words are spoken. When prayer is released in faith, come, it becomes a legal instruction in the spirit. It continues working like a command that has already been issued. Just as a seed continues to grow after it is planted, prayer continues to function after it is spoken. When you engage midnight battle prayers and then sleep, you are not being passive. You are demonstrating trust that what you have released is more powerful than your consciousness. Sleep in this context is not weakness, it is confidence. There are forces that exploit silence, ignorance, and spiritual gaps. Patterns of delay, repeated losses, unexplained fatigue, and stagnant seasons often have roots deeper than effort and strategy. Some battles are not resolved by working harder, but by praying better. Midnight prayers confront root causes, not just symptoms. They address foundations, not appearances. When you pray at this level, you are not begging. You are enforcing spiritual legality. Consistency is what builds spiritual altars. One night of prayer may bring relief, but persistence establishes dominance. When midnight prayers become a lifestyle, the spirit realm recognizes a pattern, and patterns attract results. Over time, resistance weakens, doors respond faster, and favor becomes predictable. Come, not because life has become easier, but because authority has been established. Playing a battle prayer every night as you sleep is not about background noise. It is about agreement. Your spirit listens even when your mind rests. Faith comes by hearing, and alignment is sustained by repetition. Come, as those prayers play, your atmosphere is guarded, your dreams are filtered, and your night hours are no longer vulnerable. You are declaring that even in rest, you are not defenseless. There comes a point where the believer must learn to rest, not because the battle is over, but because victory has been secured in the realm that truly decides outcomes. Come, when prayer has been released with understanding, you can sleep with peace, knowing that while your eyes are closed, heaven is active and what was sent ahead of you is fighting with precision. This is not mysticism. It is spiritual intelligence. Those who understand the power of timing, consistency, and alignment do not live at the mercy of the night. They rule over it. They turn midnight into a place of advantage, rest into a weapon, and prayer into a continuous force that never sleeps. Midnight represents more than a change of hours. It is a spiritual intersection where endings and beginnings overlap. It is the moment when one day relinquishes authority and another assumes control, making it a sensitive point in the flow of time. In spiritual terms, transitions are moments of vulnerability and opportunity, because whatever takes charge at a boundary often influences what follows. This is why midnight has consistently been associated with decisive spiritual activity, judgments, interventions, and reversals. It is not that God is limited to a time, but that time itself carries patterns, and midnight is one of the most charged patterns in spiritual operations. At midnight, human activity is at its lowest. The body is naturally inclined toward rest, defenses are relaxed, and consciousness is reduced. In contrast, the spirit realm does not operate on physical fatigue. This imbalance creates a window where spiritual forces, both positive and negative, are highly active. Throughout history and scripture, moments of deliverance, liberation, confrontation occurred at night, often at midnight, because that hour exposes what is hidden and amplifies what has been prepared in secret. When distractions are minimized, spiritual signals become clearer, and actions taken in the spirit carry unusual weight. Midnight also symbolizes secrecy and depth. Many things that cannot survive daylight thrive in darkness, and this applies spiritually. Hidden agendas, unspoken covenants, inherited patterns, and unresolved spiritual matters often operate beneath the surface of visible life. Midnight prayer confronts these hidden layers directly because it meets darkness on its own ground. It is not reactionary, it is strategic. Instead of waiting for problems to manifest openly, midnight engagement addresses them at the level of origin before they mature into visible outcomes. Another dimension of midnight is its association with verdicts. Courts function on timing, and in the spirit realm, timing determines outcomes. Midnight is a judicial hour, a moment when decisions are issued, cycles are reviewed, and permissions are either renewed or revoked. This is why delays suddenly break, long-standing issues shift, or seasons change abruptly when spiritual engagement is aligned with this hour. It is not coincidence, but alignment with a time that naturally responds to authoritative spiritual activity. Midnight also represents the threshold between old and new. Whatever is carried into a new day often shapes how that day unfolds. Spiritually, if battles are won at midnight, the day that follows is influenced by that victory. If conflicts are ignored at midnight, they often manifest as struggles throughout the day. This is why engaging midnight spiritually is not about superstition, but foresight. It is preparing the unseen before dealing with the seen. There is also a personal dimension to midnight. It mirrors seasons in life when clarity is low, direction feels uncertain, and progress seems paused. Understanding midnight spiritually helps interpret these seasons correctly. They are not always signs of defeat, but invitations to deeper engagement. When one learns to pray effectively at midnight, literal or symbolic, confusion gives way to instruction, and pressure produces alignment rather than collapse. Midnight, therefore, is not feared by those who understand it. It is respected, utilized, and redeemed. it becomes a strategic hour rather than a vulnerable one, a moment of authority instead of anxiety. Come, a gateway where divine intervention overrides opposition, cycles are corrected, and destinies are repositioned. Prayer that continues working while the body sleeps reveals a dimension of spiritual life that goes beyond conscious effort. Many people assume that prayer is only effective while words are actively being spoken, but in reality, prayer is a spiritual transaction that does not end when the mouth closes. Once prayer is released with faith, understanding and alignment, it enters the spirit realm as an ongoing instruction. Just as spoken words can echo in the mind long after they are heard, prayer continues to operate in the unseen realm long after physical awareness has rested. The human body requires sleep, but the spirit does not depend on physical alertness to remain active. Sleep only suspends the conscious mind, not spiritual authority. When prayer has been properly established, sleep becomes a state of trust rather than vulnerability. This is why it is possible to lie down in peace even in the middle of intense battles. Calm, because the outcome is no longer dependent on human vigilance. Prayer shifts responsibility from personal effort to divine oversight, allowing rest without fear. There is also a deep connection between the subconscious and spiritual receptivity. During sleep, mental resistance is lowered, internal noise is reduced, and the heart becomes more impressionable. This makes the night hours powerful for spiritual reinforcement. When prayer-filled words, declarations, or battle prayers are released before sleep or played during sleep, they continue to shape inner alignment. Calm, faith is reinforced, fear is displaced, and spiritual posture is maintained even without conscious participation. Calm, prayer working during sleep also protects against unseen interference. The night season is often when attacks are subtle, calm, indirect, and psychological rather than physical. Dreams, thoughts, and emotions are frequent entry points for oppression and confusion. When prayer is already active, it functions as a spiritual guard, filtering what is permitted to access the inner life. This does not mean every dream becomes pleasant, but it means nothing is allowed to operate unchecked. Prayer establishes boundaries that remain effective even when awareness is paused. Another dimension of prayer working during sleep is continuity. Many spiritual victories are not the result of a single intense moment, but of sustained engagement over time. When prayer becomes continuous, either through recorded prayers, repeated declarations, or established spiritual routines, it creates momentum. The spirit realm responds strongly to consistency. What may not shift after one night begins to yield after persistent nights, because spiritual resistance weakens under repeated pressure. This form of prayer also trains the believer in dependence rather than anxiety. Instead of feeling the need to stay awake, strive endlessly, or remain mentally tense, prayer invites rest as an act of faith. Sleeping after prayer is a declaration that what has been committed is secure. It reflects confidence that divine power is not limited by human consciousness. The rest becomes a testimony that the battle is being handled beyond personal strength. Over time, prayer that works during sleep produces subtle but measurable changes. Peace deepens, reactions change, resilience increases, and spiritual sensitivity becomes sharper. These shifts are often noticed before external circumstances change, because inner alignment usually precedes outward manifestation. Prayer reshapes the inner environment first, ensuring that when answers appear, the individual is prepared to sustain them. In this way, Prayer does not compete with sleep. It sanctifies it. The night hours are no longer empty or vulnerable, but become productive, guarded, and spiritually active, turning rest into a platform where divine activity continues uninterrupted. Come, spiritual battles often take place beyond human awareness. Come, operating in realms that are not immediately visible or emotionally felt. Come, many conflicts that affect daily life do not originate from conscious choices or physical circumstances alone, but are influenced by unseen forces, patterns, and permissions that shape outcomes silently. This is why a person may do everything right outwardly and still encounter repeated resistance, unexplained opposition. There are cycles that seem immune to logic. These are indicators of battles happening beyond the surface. Come, where awareness is limited but impact is real, because these battles are unseen. Come, they cannot always be confronted through willpower, intellect, or effort. Awareness alone does not equal authority. Victory comes from positioning rather than observation. When prayer becomes the primary means of engagement, it allows a believer to address conflicts at their level of operation instead of reacting to their effects. Prayer does not require full knowledge of the enemy's strategy. It operates on alignment with higher authority that overrides inferior forces regardless of their complexity. While the physical body rests or goes about routine activities, spiritual forces continue to operate without pause. Time zones, sleep cycles, and mental states do not restrict the spirit realm. This is why battles can intensify at night, come during transitions, or in moments of emotional stillness. It is not because a person is weak, but because awareness is reduced. Understanding this truth shifts the mindset from fear to wisdom. Recognizing that victory depends on preparation, not constant alertness. Prayer positions victory by establishing authority in advance. Rather than waiting for conflict to become obvious, prayer creates a spiritual environment where certain outcomes are already decided. This is similar to securing legal protection before a dispute arises. When authority is established early, attacks lose their ability to cause lasting damage. Prayer, in this sense, is preventive as much as it is corrective. It does not merely respond to problems, it defines boundaries that problems cannot cross. There is also the reality of inherited and environmental battles. Not all spiritual conflicts begin with personal choices. Some are connected to family patterns, territorial influences, or long-standing spiritual conditions. That these battles often operate subtly, influencing behavior, opportunity, and direction without announcing their presence. Prayer brings light to these areas, not always by revealing details, but by neutralizing their influence. Victory does not always require exposure, it requires enforcement. Another key aspect is endurance. Spiritual battles are rarely resolved instantly because they often involve resistance that tests consistency. This is why positioning matters more than intensity. One emotional moment of prayer may bring relief, but sustained positioning brings dominion. When prayer becomes regular, structured, and aligned, it creates spiritual pressure that gradually dismantles opposition. The unseen realm responds to patterns more than bursts. And persistence signals authority. Understanding that battles occur beyond awareness also changes how rest is viewed. Rest is not withdrawal from conflict, but a sign that confidence has replaced panic. When prayer has positioned victory, the rest becomes possible without vulnerability. Fear demands constant vigilance, but faith allows delegation. Delegating the outcome to divine authority does not imply passivity. Come, it reflects trust in a system that functions beyond human limitation. As this understanding matures, reactions to challenges change. Instead of anxiety, there is discernment. Instead of exhaustion, there is stability. Instead of confusion, there is quiet confidence. This shift happens because the believer is no longer trying to fight visible symptoms, but is aligned with a higher strategy that governs outcomes from the unseen realm outward. Aligning the subconscious spirit man with divine authority is a process that happens through repetition, exposure, and consistency rather than through occasional intense moments. There, the subconscious is the deepest level of internal programming where beliefs, expectations, and spiritual posture are stored. It is the place that reacts before the mind has time to reason. If this level is not aligned, a person may confess faith consciously while still responding in fear, doubt, or hesitation instinctively. This internal conflict weakens authority because true authority flows from agreement within. Consistent midnight prayers play a crucial role in this alignment because they bypass surface resistance. During the night, mental defenses are lowered and the inner man is more receptive. Repeated exposure to faith-filled words, declarations, and authoritative prayers gradually rewires internal responses. Over time, the spirit begins to agree naturally with divine truth without struggle. Faith stops being an effort and becomes a reflex. This is not emotional conditioning, but spiritual calibration. Divine authority functions best when there is harmony between what is believed, what is spoken, and what is expected. Misalignment occurs when the mouth speaks victory, but the inner man anticipates loss. Consistent prayer corrects this gap by repeatedly presenting truth to the deepest level of the soul. Each repetition strengthens alignment, just as repeated training builds muscle memory. Eventually, responses shift from reaction to dominion, and confidence becomes stable rather than situational. The subconscious spirit man also governs how a person interprets experiences. Two people can face the same challenge and respond differently based on internal alignment. One sees an obstacle come, the other sees an assignment. One retreats, the other advances. Midnight prayers shape this interpretive lens by reinforcing identity, authority, and expectation at a level that logic alone cannot reach. When alignment is established, circumstances lose the power to intimidate even before they change. Consistency is critical because authority is cumulative. One night of prayer introduces alignment, but repeated nights establish it. The spirit realm recognizes patterns, and authority grows through sustained agreement. Over time, resistance decreases not because battles stop occurring, but because internal alignment prevents those battles from gaining leverage. The enemy often targets inconsistency more than weakness because inconsistency creates openings. Persistence closes those openings gradually but decisively. Aligning the subconscious spirit man also stabilizes emotions. Fear, anxiety, and discouragement often arise from internal misalignment rather than external pressure. When the inner man is repeatedly anchored in divine truths, emotional fluctuations reduce. Peace becomes dominant, not because problems disappear, but because authority has been internalized. This internal peace is not passivity, it is controlled strength. Another result of this alignment is discernment. When the subconscious is aligned, spiritual signals are processed accurately. Confusion reduces, clarity increases, and sensitivity sharpens. Decisions are made with confidence, not because every detail is known, but because the inner man is aligned with a higher source of wisdom. This alignment prevents overreaction and underreaction, both of which weaken authority. Over time, consistent midnight prayers transform identity. A person stops seeing themselves as someone seeking victory and begins to operate as someone enforcing it. This shift does not happen through information alone, but through repeated spiritual exposure. When alignment is complete, authority flows naturally, restfully, and without strain, because the inner man is no longer divided, but fully positioned in agreement with divine power. Come, spiritual altars are not physical structures, but established points of consistent spiritual engagement where authority, access, and influence are built over time. An altar represents continuity, memory, and legal standing in the spirit realm. It is formed wherever there is repeated sacrifice, devotion, and intentional alignment. Every time prayer is offered with understanding and consistency, something is being erected in the unseen. Over time, these repeated engagements create a recognizable spiritual location that carries weight, history, and influence. Repetition is what gives an altar strength. One act of prayer may touch the heart, but repeated acts establish presence. Come, the spirit realm responds strongly to patterns because patterns signal intention and ownership. When prayer is offered sporadically, it creates moments. When prayer is offered persistently, it creates a system. Altars are systems, not events. They become points where spiritual traffic increases. Come, where divine attention is consistently focused and where authority accumulates. Persistence also creates remembrance. In the spirit realm, continuity is recorded, just as habits shape character in the natural world. Repeated prayer shapes spiritual identity. Over time, an altar begins to speak on behalf of the one who built it. Even when no words are being spoken in the moment, the history of that altar continues to testify. This is why consistent prayer produces results that seem disproportionate to present effort. Come, the current outcome is often supported by past engagement. Come, building spiritual altars through persistence also establishes boundaries. An altar defines territory. It marks a spiritual claim over a space, a time, or an aspect of life. Midnight prayers, when repeated consistently, claim the night season. What was once vulnerable becomes guarded. What was once chaotic becomes ordered. Territory is not taken by desire, but by presence, and presence is maintained through repetition. Another dimension of persistence is depth. Repeated prayer does not remain shallow. Over time, it moves from surface level concerns to foundational issues. The spirit gains clarity, sensitivity increases, and prayers become more precise. This depth is not achieved through emotional intensity, but through familiarity. The more consistently one engages, the clearer the spiritual language becomes. Come, this is why persistent prayer often leads to sudden breakthroughs after long periods of apparent silence. Depth was being formed before results were manifested. Spiritual altars also attract support. In the unseen realm, alignment draws reinforcement. When an altar is established, it becomes a point of convergence where assistance is released. This does not happen randomly, but in response to consistency. Sporadic engagement does not sustain spiritual traffic, but persistence does. Over time, the resistance weakens because opposition struggles to operate in territories where authority is consistently reinforced. Persistence also disciplines the inner life. It trains focus, strengthens resolve, and stabilizes commitment. Many battles are lost not because of lack of power, but because of inconsistency. When prayer becomes persistent, Come, discipline replaces impulse. This steadiness produces endurance, and endurance produces dominion. The altar becomes a place where distractions lose influence and purpose becomes clearer. As spiritual altars mature, results become more predictable. Peace stabilizes, discernment sharpens, and opposition loses surprise. Come, the altar does not eliminate challenges, but it determines how they are resolved. Over time, come, the believer no longer approaches prayer as an emergency response, but as a governing system. Persistence transforms prayer from a reaction into a foundation that continually shapes outcomes, seasons, and spiritual authority. Rest, when understood spiritually, is not withdrawal from responsibility, but a declaration of trust in the authority already released. After warfare prayers have been prayed with understanding and alignment, continuing to strive mentally often reflects uncertainty rather than diligence. True spiritual engagement reaches a point where action shifts from speaking to standing and from effort to confidence. Rest becomes the visible evidence that a matter has been handed over to a higher jurisdiction where outcomes are decided beyond human strain. Many people confuse rest with passivity, but in spiritual terms, rest is often the highest form of faith. Anxiety insists on constant monitoring, repeated checking, and mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios. Faith, however, releases control after alignment has been established. When warfare prayers are released effectively, come, the work moves from the visible realm to the unseen, where human effort cannot improve the outcome. Rest acknowledges this transition. It is not ignorance of battle, but assurance of governance. Rest also protects what prayer has accomplished. After intense spiritual engagement, remaining in a state of tension can reopen doors that prayer has already closed. Fear, doubt, and mental agitation can weaken spiritual posture if allowed to dominate after prayer. Rest stabilizes the inner environment, allowing the authority released in prayer to function without interference. It keeps the heart aligned with confidence rather than suspicion. There is also a spiritual law of delegation at work. Just as systems function best when responsibility is correctly assigned, spiritual warfare reaches effectiveness when the outcome is entrusted to divine oversight. Warfare prayers initiate action, but rest allows that action to unfold without human obstruction. Constant mental involvement often attempts to solve spiritually resolved matters with natural reasoning, which creates conflict rather than clarity. Rest honors the process already set in motion. Rest as an act of faith also reshapes identity. It shifts a person from seeing themselves as someone fighting for victory to someone enforcing a decision already made. This identity shift changes posture, reactions, and emotional stability. Pressure no longer dictates behavior because confidence has replaced urgency. The absence of panic does not mean the absence of seriousness. It reflects certainty of outcome. Another dimension of rest is endurance. Long battles exhaust those who believe everything depends on them. Rest preserves strength by preventing emotional burnout. When warfare prayers have been released, rest allows renewal, while the engagement continues on a level not limited by fatigue. This creates sustainability, ensuring that authority is maintained over time rather than consumed by intensity. Rest also guards perception. Fatigue distorts judgment, amplifies fear, and reduces discernment. When a person rests after prayer, clarity is preserved. Decisions are made calmly, responses are measured, and distractions lose power. This clarity is essential because many victories are lost not in battle, but in reaction. The rest prevents unnecessary reactions that could undermine progress. Over time, practicing rest after warfare prayers retrains the inner life. The nervous system, emotions, and thought patterns begin to align with peace rather than tension. This internal environment becomes hostile to fear and confusion. Peace is no longer dependent on circumstances, but anchored in trust. This kind of rest communicates confidence to the spirit realm, signaling that authority has been accepted and enforced. Rest, therefore, becomes a spiritual statement. It declares that what was spoken has been heard, what was released is working, and what was committed is secure. It transforms the night from a place of worry into a place of confidence, allowing the unseen work to continue without resistance from the visible realm. Midnight is not an ordinary hour. And prayer is not an ordinary activity. When these two meet with understanding, consistency, and faith, they produce authority that goes beyond human effort. Midnight battle prayer is about positioning, not panic, about alignment, not anxiety. It recognizes that some victories are decided in unseen realms before they ever appear in visible life. By engaging prayer that continues even while the body sleeps, spiritual battles are confronted at their level of operation. The inner man is aligned with divine authority, and spiritual altars are established through persistence. From this place, rest is no longer weakness, but confidence, a clear declaration that what has been released is already working. When prayer becomes consistent, strategic, and trusted, the night loses its power to intimidate. And life begins to respond to authority rather than effort.